This is the gospel of Jesus Christ according to John, the 18th chapter. Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." This is the gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Today is the feast of Christ the King. It was established in 1925 by Pope Pius XI in response to the growing rise of ultra-nationalist leaders in Europe, as well as the King of Italy's claim upon the city of Rome. It was a political act of the Pope to declare this feast. It was every bit as much a political act as refusing to burn incense to the emperor in imperial Rome in the times of the early church was a political act. Declaring the feast to Kingship of Christ was an act of denouncing the authority that the nationalist leaders were claiming. In the past 100 years, the feast has grown well beyond a Roman Catholic rite. It's now observed in one form or the other by, the majority of the greater church throughout the world. And it has shifted in both the date of its observation and in its significance throughout the years. But it remains a concrete political statement to declare Christ as King. It does us no good whatsoever to over-spiritualize the claim. We are fooling ourselves if we believe Christ can reign in our hearts while our hands and feet do the work contrary to the vision of his kingdom. And yet, we miss the point if we believe the work we should be doing is placing Jesus upon the throne or in the halls of worldly power. One character in the Bible made that offer to Jesus. It was the devil. And Jesus rejected it. So what do we mean when we talk about Jesus as king? It's not over the sort of kingdom that was supported by the Sanhedrin, the Sadducees and Pharisees. They're the ones who turned Jesus in to Pilate in the first place. And we can, and often do in the church, claim that they did this to preserve their own meager claims to some sense of power. But that wouldn't be following our eighth commandment obligations to view their actions in the best possible light. If we give them the benefit of the doubt, if we assume that at least some of them, if not the majority, were acting out of what seemed to be honest, good intentions, then we have to recognize that they were very concerned about their obligations and responsibilities to the people that they were responsible for. Rome was dangerous. It had a habit of destroying anyone who went against it, and they believed that Jesus, declaring a kingdom that had come near, was a threat to the safety of the people. That's what Caiaphas meant when he said it would be better to let one man die than to have a whole nation destroyed. See, that wasn't an overly spiritualized understanding of the threat Jesus posed due to some concept of sin or God's wrath. They wanted him dead because they believed his claims could get a whole lot more people killed. The Sanhedrin fully believed in the sovereignty of God's reign over all things, but they saw their role as one of making the practical decisions for God's people living in the context of the Roman Empire. And that's not an unreasonable understanding of their role. But as they saw it, that meant Jesus was a threat. He refused to couch any of his claims or actions in language that was friendly to the Roman Empire, and that made them view him as a radical activist that could get people killed. The thing is, he didn't have the support of the radical activists either. That's what Jesus is talking about when he says that his followers would be fighting to keep him from being handed over if his kingdom were of this world. See, there were a group of people, less spoken about in the Bible, but you can see them in the background. A group of people known as the Zealots, who believed that it was their call to rise up against Rome, and that if they did as God's people, God would assure their everlasting victory, despite how ridiculously lopsided the odds of a small backwood nation rising against the largest empire the world had ever known would be. See, if Jesus had their support, well, Rome may still have crushed them, but Pilate would not have been having a calm conversation with him at this point. The Zealots would have stormed his headquarters to take him back. But they had begun to view Jesus as not willing to take action, not really any different from the Sanhedrin. He used great rhetoric, but wasn't willing to do what was required. And it's helpful to place in contrast these two views of Jesus when we consider the kingdom over which we declare Christ's reign today. The establishment viewed him as a radical threat, dangerous enough to warrant execution, while the starry-eyed idealist viewed him as ineffective, unwilling to take the leap that God called us to seize victory. Jesus was not cautious enough for some and not brazen enough for others, and that inability to place him in a specific camp, to put him with a team, that's what led to him standing alone with Pilate, wondering who told this Roman governor that he was a king. Was it those who thought that was a threatening statement warning Pilate, or was it those speaking it in hope that Pilate overheard? That inability to place him in a camp, that's what will eventually leave him standing alone with Pilate again as the crowd shouts for the release of Barabbas. The kingdom he was proclaiming didn't fit into anyone's narrative. It wasn't a pragmatic peace that would allow them to observe their spiritual relationship with God if they simply accepted the brutal realities of living under Roman rule. And it wasn't an all-out revolution that would establish a nation in God's name like the one of the first temple period that Babylon had destroyed. It was neither. And roughly 70 years after this conversation with Pilate, Rome will strike down the new temple that had been built. Neither the pragmatic peace nor the revolution would be successful for the people. There is a kingdom not of this world. But if Jesus had chosen a side that day, he could have avoided the cross. I mean, even if there weren't zealots storming the headquarters to release him, he would have found enough people shouting for his release instead of Barabbas. But choosing a side meant ignoring the needs of real people. It meant either ignoring the real people who lay on the ground in front of the temple uncared for, or it meant ignoring those who would come to him in the dark that the more radical elements would have said had already cast their lot and shouldn't be welcomed in. Jesus apparently would rather die in service of real, true human beings than live in service of an abstract ideal. His kingdom is not built for Platonic truths. His kingdom is for those of us caught up in the mess of being the truth of life. And his kingship is built upon true love in service of true people. That's what I want us to know on this Christ the King Sunday. Is first, you are one of those beloved of which the kingdom is built. And second, if you're looking for the kingdom, don't go looking for idealistic extremes. Look at the people right in front of you. Not abstract ideas of what is good or righteous or holy. Look to the people God put in your life, those that are in need, which we can meet, and those who see our needs that they can meet. God's kingdom is made of these people. I could have spent today lifting up all the worldly kingdoms that we try and place Jesus as Lord over. We are not averse to trying to place Jesus in the same sort of boxes that his contemporaries did. But in the end, Jesus will not be placed in any of those any more than he would have been placed in the ones of his times. Rather than focus on what he would not do, let's focus on the truth of his kingdom. A kingdom made of beloved people. Served, not ruled by a king. One that is eternal and real. So here's a quote from C.S. Lewis about that immortal kingdom made of true people. What we would call ordinary people. C.S. Lewis writes, "There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilizations, these are mortal, and their life is to ours as the life of a gnat. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors, next to the blessed sacrament itself. Your neighbor is the holiest object presented to our senses." As we head towards Advent to watch and wait for the coming of his kingdom, may we be blessed to see it in the flesh and blood neighbors we encounter every day.